Hi, I'm Conrad Richter, president of Richters Herbs in Goodwood, Ontario. For the past 50 years, we have been growing plants and seeds and supplying dried herbs right across North America and beyond. A hallmark of our business has been to seek out new and interesting plants and make them available to gardeners and to commercial growers here in North America. Over the past few years, we've been very interested in the herbs of West Africa, and we've spent a lot of time there, and even to the point where we've established a farm in the country of Ghana. There are many, many incredible herbs in West Africa, and such a great tradition that's still living, where you can consult with local herbalists and learn amazing things about these plants. And among them is one herb that I want to talk about today, and that is Cryptolepis sanguinolenta. This is a herb that is well known as an antimalarial. It has been used for centuries in West Africa. It's really a go-to remedy for the treatment of malaria. Traditionally used throughout West Africa, but it's not just an anti-malaria, it is also a broad-spectrum antibiotic. So today, my goal is to introduce you to this plant, how it grows and how it is used, and to touch on some of the research that supports these uses. Well, here again is the same picture of Cryptolepis, and you see it growing in an open field in a kind of semi-wild state. It looks like a low plant with the white cream flowers, but it is actually a climber, and an aggressive one at that. Here you can see Cryptolepis growing up a tree. You can see the vines are wrapped around the trunk of a tree and has created quite a mass of vines all around that tree. To the right, you can see the leaves of the Cryptolepis, and also to the upper left. Here's a piece of a vine that's been cut and dropped to the ground, and you can see the vines will even twirl around themselves. Here's our farm manager, Sakura Jamezi, and he's uncovered the earth at the base of the Cryptolepis vines, at the base of a tree. And you can see he's exposed some of the roots already. Here Sakura is holding a piece of a root, and you can see under the bark is a yellow cortex. This yellow cortex is actually a natural dye. So as I mentioned, Cryptolepis is native primarily to West Africa, but it is also found in parts of Central Africa. On the right side of this slide, you'll see the country of Ghana, where we've established our farm. The green parts there are the regions of Ghana where this plant is endemic. Our farm is in the Volta region, which is to the south and the east of the endemic area. So the Cryptolepis is not endemic to the area where we're trying to grow it. And you can see that there are some challenges that we're already facing trying to grow this plant in an area where it's not typically found. On the left, you see a few young seedlings. There's actually quite a lot of them there. You don't see them all. And we've got them growing up these stakes. And on the right is a little bit of a close-up of the seedlings. And you can see that the leaves have this kind of blistering effect. And that blistering is a hallmark of too much light. So we have a bit of a challenge here. We have to figure out how to grow this plant as a climber, and yet at the same time provide shade. And when you think of the previous slides where the plant was growing up a tree, that the tree was providing natural shade to the plant. But as Cryptolepis has become more and more known and much more in demand over, I would say, the last 2 or 3 decades, we're actually starting to run up against shortages. It is still widespread, and through those 4 regions that I showed in the previous slide, But supplies are definitely tightening, and it is going to become necessary to grow this plant. Well, let's look at some of the traditional uses that are known for this plant. Principally, it's used for fevers and for infections, respiratory diseases. It's also used for insomnia. It does have an effect on brain function. It's also used for diarrhea, and especially for amoebic infection, hypertension, inflammation. It's an especially good anti-inflammatory herb. And of course, malaria, diabetes, stomach and intestinal disorders, tuberculosis, and hepatitis and wounds. Traditionally, the fresh or dried roots are boiled for about 30 minutes, then simply cooled and strained, and then a calabash full would be taken by the patient 3 times a day. Principally, this would be the type of protocol for someone suffering from fevers, or as we understand, malaria. The practitioner would determine exactly how much of the roots to be provided, and it could vary depending on the condition and the patient. A number of years ago, a few decades ago, people have tried to commercialize the Cryptolepis as an antimalarial medicine in the form of a tea. It's a very simple remedy. It's just simply the root of the Cryptolepis in tea bags. And this particular remedy, this simple tea bag formulation, was subjected to a clinical study, and the results were incredibly encouraging. As you can see here, all patients were simply given a tea bag to take 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, for 5 days. And within 72 hours, 50% of the patients were cleared of their parasites. And by day 7, all of the patients were cleared. And even just by day 3, 72 hours, all their symptoms such as fever, chills, nausea, and vomiting would be cleared. So it's an incredibly effective herb. Now, over the years, there's been quite a lot of attention from the scientific community, medical and scientific community, and I'm really excited to say that a lot of this research is happening right in Ghana, and where it has a long tradition of use. And all of the uses, our activities, the pharmacological activities you see on this slide here, have been backed up by actual studies, either in vitro or in animal studies or human studies. The main compound, which is an alkaloid, that seems to be responsible for many of these properties, is called cryptolepin. There are a number of other related compounds, all probably involved in the synthesis of cryptolepin, but this seems to be the one that that explains most of the medicinal effects of the herb itself, the root. In this slide, I wanted to touch on a potential concern with the use of Cryptolepis. So in this study, which was done in Ghana, looked at treating mice with Cryptolepis at varying dosages. First, as just a pre-treatment for 14 days before mating, or pre-treatment with 14 days, mating, and then continued treatment throughout gestation. So let's look at the first part, where it was just a pre-treatment for 14 days, then the mice were allowed to mate, and then the females became pregnant and gave birth. So what this slide is showing is that no matter what the dosages are, and that is everywhere from 0, the control, all the way up to 1,000 milligrams per kilogram body weight, there's no effect on mating, no effect on the fertility index. That is, the females were just as apt to have babies whether they were had no dose at all or whether they had the highest dose. And the gestation period showed no significant difference across all the dosages. And the live birth index, the successive live births among all the births was pretty much consistent right across all the doses. So what this showed is that a prior treatment before sex and gestation had no effect on the live birth index. However, if that same pre-treatment was continued, the same treatment continued during gestation, you saw some issues here, where the fertility index dropped down to 0 at 1,000 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. No babies were born, and you also see that the live birth index declined from the control level at 100% down. So this is a concern that Cryptolepis should not be used during pregnancy. A generally safe dose is anything lower than 500 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. The LD50 for Cryptolepis, that's not cryptoleptine but Cryptolepis, is somewhere north of 3,000 milligrams per kilogram body weight. It couldn't be estimated because it wasn't the study that looked at this or attempted to get this number did not go high enough. So we know at least it's above 3,000 milligrams per kilogram body weight. And also the recommendation is, as mentioned, caution in the use of Cryptolepis during pregnancy. In other words, really, it should not be used during pregnancy. So this is actually from a fairly recent study that was published in Nature, which is the world's preeminent science journal. And it was a look at the effect of cryptolepine, the active ingredient in Cryptolepis, on 4 lines of melanoma, 4 different types of melanoma. What you see here is at the control level, at the left of this photograph, at 0 cryptolepine, you have the highest amount of melanoma cultures growing. But in a dose-dependent way, as you increase the dose from 1 micromolar all the way up to 7.5 micromolar, you find that the melanoma is killed off to the point where it's almost absent at 7.5. This dose-dependent effect is really exciting. In the same study, they grafted melanoma onto mice and treated the mice with cryptolepine at 10 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and they found a significant inhibition of tumor growth, and it's not associated with any apparent sign of toxicity. One of the things about Cryptolepis is it has a broad antibiotic effect. It's an antifungal. There is evidence that it's also antiviral. We already know it's anti-malaria. And here we look at a study that looked at the antimicrobial activity of extracts of Cryptolepis. Now you see a number of different bacteria. All of these lines here are resistant to common drugs, common antibiotic drugs. So, for example, tetracycline, penicillin, gentamicin, and a whole bunch of others. These are varying resistant. Most of them are 100% resistant, and all of them are at least 50 to 60% resistant to those common antibiotics. Well, here, what we see is that on the first column, under the ethanol extract, you see that 11 out of 16 of these resistant bacteria are susceptible to Cryptolepis. And then from that ethanol extract, what the researchers did is they further fractionated it. We're using a different solvents such as petroleum, ether, chloroform, etc., and looked at what those extracts, what the compounds in those extracts, and what their effects were on these same bacteria. And you can see that in the case of, for instance, the chloroform fraction, every one of these 16 bacteria were susceptible. An interesting development over the last, I'd say the last 10, 20 years now, has been using Cryptolepis, this African herb, for very North American disease, the tick-borne diseases such as Lyme and babesiosis. And this study here that came out a couple years ago looked at the effects of various herbs, herbal extracts, on Borrelia burgdorferi, which is one of the microbes that cause Lyme disease. Now, this you can see in each of these squares here is a different herb or maybe a different concentration of a herb. And down to the bottom, you see, to the right, you see doxycycline. And that is one of the drugs that is still today given to Lyme disease patients. It takes quite a while for this drug to clear up Lyme disease, if it is successful at clearing it at all. Now, what you see in these different squares are these star-like green area spots. And each of those spots indicates a colony that has survived the treatment that has been given to or applied to that particular square. And if you look at all of these, you can see to the upper left, at the 1% Cryptolepis, it is the only one among all of these that has no colonies at all. It's the only one that cleared up the Borrelia completely. And not only that, there are two types of, or two stages of infection. There is what the growing phase, which is like a new infection, and then there is what's stationary phase, where typically the bacteria lays down a biofilm which makes it very difficult for antibiotics to reach the bacteria itself. So these slides here are all of the stationary form where there is a biofilm laid down, and as you can see, Cryptolepis penetrates that film and does clear up all of the so it's really, really amazing. Other than the study that I just showed you, there haven't been any really good studies to develop any protocols, and we're still reliant on protocols that were developed, I would say, more or less by guesswork, and then just seeing what kind of works and what doesn't work. And Stephen Bruder has for many years now had been a strong advocate for the use of Cryptolepis is as part of, not just the sole, but part of a treatment protocol for Lyme disease and the related co-infections of babesiosis and others. His recommendation is with a 1 to 5 tincture, 5 mils 3 times a day for 10 days, and repeat once if necessary. A practitioner who has made it his specialty to treat Lyme disease is Dr. Marty Ross. He is not using herbs exclusively. His first line of attack are antibiotics, a number of different ones. He goes at great length on what needs to be done. But he is a great believer in herbal methods, and Cryptolepis is his #1 choice. Okay, I've come to the end of my presentation. Admittedly, it is a very brief introduction to an incredible herb. Take a look at our website for more information on more amazing herbs, and I thank you very much.
At Richters, it's not just a garden, it's a whole new world. For herb plants, seeds, veggies, and more, visit us at richters.com or call 1-800-668-4372.